Luna's engagement to William is threatened by her past as a hostess and his sister Mila's interference. Mila, a former co-worker, bullies Luna and tries to sabotage their relationship. As family tensions rise and secrets surface, Luna faces a crucial decision about her future. A family gathering becomes the turning point, with unexpected revelations that could change everything.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Drama of Destiny. This story we're about to tell has a shocking twist beyond your imagination. First, let's get started.
What exactly is a housing complex like? Aren't they filled with poor people? Well, maybe a wealthy person would not be there. My SIL gave a characteristic laugh at my answer. Mila's sharp gaze seemed to capture and not let me go. There was something insane about that gaze, and it even felt dangerous. My name is Luna. I'm a 24-year-old office worker. I have a fiancé who's 12 years older than me. He's an ordinary, reliable businessman named William. We met 2 years ago when I was a senior in college, working part-time at a cafe. I remember him well because he came in with large shopping bags, looking like he'd been out shopping all day. Because of financial reasons, I spent more time working than having fun, so he quickly remembered my face too. After a few conversations, he invited me to dinner just before I graduated. Honestly, many customers had done the same. But William was different. His serious demeanor left a good impression, so I accepted his invitation. I want you to consider marriage. I'm not saying this because I'm much older and desperate to marry. I want to marry because of you. At our first dinner, he proposed out of the blue. I couldn't respond immediately, but he smiled warmly and said, "I'm sorry to come so suddenly, but beyond going out with you, for me, there's marriage. I'm not being vague. I'm willing to accept you as a whole person. That's all." His words deeply moved me. As we spent more time dining and enjoying weekends together, I gradually fell for him. It took me 6 months to agree to date him. But there was still something I hadn't told him. Due to financial reasons, I worked as a hostess in a club in New York during college. But it wasn't something I was ashamed of or hiding from anyone. But I hesitated to tell him because he had an unexpected aversion to nightlife jobs. Since he said our relationship would lead to marriage, I decided to tell him about my experience in nightlife. No, I don't agree. One day, when we were meeting for a date, he surprised me by bringing his mother along. She was very large and dressed flamboyantly. She wore a green skirt and a top with a red background and black polka dots. She looked like a watermelon. The woman I thought was his mother was actually introduced as his sister. Looking closer, I realized I knew her. "Ah, nice to meet you," or rather, before I could finish, she abruptly said, "No, I don't agree." I quickly understood and greeted her, "Nice to meet you. I'm Luna." I looked up at her as if meeting for the first time. William didn't notice our interaction and said, "I told my sister about the woman I'm considering marrying. She insisted on meeting you. Nice to meet you. I'm Mila. I've been close with Will since we were kids. I'm happy to meet you today." Her flat tone was unnatural, like a ventriloquist's dummy. When William went to the bathroom, she quickly said, "I don't want my brother or my parents to know that I work part-time in the nightclub. And I know you don't want them to know either. I'll keep my mouth shut, and you'll do the same for me." Seeing William returning, she suddenly started smiling, making it hard for me to keep up. In the end, we spent the whole day with my SIL. She walks away with William, arm in arm, and walks briskly ahead. They are both tall and have long legs, thus their steps are big. Being small and short, I had to practically jog to keep up with them. "You're slow, aren't you? Your clothes are so plain and unnoticeable, you look like a tiny being," I told the two of them. "I think I'll call it a day. Please enjoy your dinner together." I was exhausted from trying to keep up and just wanted to go home. Besides, I couldn't talk about my hostess job in New York with my SIL around. I decided to bring it up another time. William seemed a bit disappointed when I said I was leaving, but my SIL held onto his arm tightly and waved goodbye. On the train home alone, I thought about my SIL, who used to work at the same club. Mila. She was loud and flashy, always wearing low-cut outfits. I remembered how much she stood out. I never expected her to become my SIL. This was because I knew how mean she could be. It was about 2 years ago. One day when I arrived at the club, the dress I was given was shredded. I showed it to the manager, who gave me a replacement, saying it happened often. I had no choice but to wear that dress, which had a design that exposed a lot of my chest and back, and I felt very embarrassed. On top of that, the dress was very similar to what Mila was wearing that day. Customers laughed at how different we looked. The worst was when someone joked that I was the daughter and Mila was the mother. Mila got very emotional and drunk and tried to grab me after the club closed. Manager stepped in just in time to prevent a disaster, but it was still a shock. I later found out Mila had shredded my dress to spite me. In short, Mila tried to harass me by tearing up my dress, but ended up facing even worse consequences herself. And more, she took it out on me, blaming me for being at the club. After finding out about it, I tried to avoid contact with Mila as much as possible. But working hard to not show any weakness to her was exhausting. Eventually, I quit the hostess jobs and moved to the cafe. Thinking about Mila being my SIL now was unsettling. And she seemed very close to William. That night, William called me. "I'm sorry for bringing my sister along unexpectedly today. I called you because I was worried I wouldn't be able to take you home properly. I got home safely. Sorry, I didn't message you. I didn't want to interrupt your time with your sister. But Luna, did you have something you wanted to tell me today?" "Yes." I was touched that he understood what was on my mind. So I told him about my past hostess jobs over the phone, what I decided to talk about, but kept quiet about my SIL. "I see. I'm surprised, but you're not doing it anymore, right?" When I told him I had quit, he seemed relieved. Then I heard voices in the background. My sister insisted on staying over tonight. I was about to ask him not to tell my SIL about my past jobs when he abruptly said, "All right, I'll call you later," and hung up, leaving me a bit uneasy. A little later, as I left work and was heading home, I was stopped by a large woman I recognized. It was my SIL. Honestly, I expected her to come. She slowly approached me and said, "We need to talk," and she grabbed my arm and dragged me to a nearby pub. Mila pushed me from behind, causing me to stumble into the pub. I ended up leaning on the passing waiter for support, and Mila scolded me, saying, You're so filthy. You're getting married, aren't you? And you're leaning on a man." I apologized to the waiter and left. The waiter said the place was full and showed us to the counter seats. "You told William about your hostess job, didn't you?" "Well, I was only talking about myself, not about you, Mila." "That's a lie. After William hung up with you, he was acting strange. He usually sleeps with me, but he refused angrily this time." "Sleeping together?" I wrote it down on a mental notebook of Mila's shocking statement. I didn't say anything. Suddenly, Mila started talking about her days as a hostess in New York. "You really knew, didn't you, about the relationship between the master, Mr. Moore, and me?" Then manager got involved, and Madison cried and tried to stop it. Mr. Smith hit me. Isla helped me, but I was the only one who got fired. There were too many people involved, and I couldn't keep up with my mental notebook. I nervously asked Mila, could you explain that again in detail?" Basically, Mila had been dating both a customer and the master of the club, which led to trouble. It was a messy love affair, like something out of a daytime drama. I'd never heard of this story before, but, have you parted ways with them now, the two of them? Yes, the two wouldn't let me go. The master never lets me come in when I go to the club. I got so mad that I left trash all over the front of the club the other day. I call Mr. Moore several times a day, but when he answers, I hang up because I can't say anything. I had no idea how to respond to Mila's story, so I decided to give up. I felt like I had heard something I shouldn't have about Mila. When I knew, Mila started drinking heavily, and soon she was too drunk to stand. "I'll call William to come get you." As I reached for my phone, Mila suddenly grabbed it and threw it away. I had no choice but to get help from the staff to take her to the address she gave me by taxi. When we arrived, it was just a normal apartment building, but then I discovered a shocking secret about Mila. When we arrived at her room, it turned out to be a stench-filled dump. Mila suddenly snapped back to reality and started shooing us away. She shut the door in our faces, and the staff and I exchanged confused looks. After that, I didn't know how to tell William about Mila's situation. As I was pondering, the day of his visit to my family for the marriage greeting approached. My sister insists on coming with me, saying she'll stand in for our parents. I couldn't refuse and agreed to let her come along. Pardon me, but Luna's mother, haven't you had a tough time? My mother replied to Mila's sudden question. Yes, after my husband died, we discovered debts and lost our home. We also struggled financially with the children, but why do you know? With a malicious grin, Mila answered my mother, I don't know how to describe it. A small housing complex, cheap furniture that could be bought for like a few dollars, cups that look like from the dollar store. I thought to myself that if my daughter is bringing someone to get married, and I can only offer this level of hospitality, then perhaps you don't have enough money. My mother looked down at Mila's words. I am sorry. Seeing my mother apologize made me sad, and I wanted to retort to Mila. I find this home very comfortable. I'd rather live a modest life than spend money frivolously. I'm happy to see that Luna was raised this way. His words brought tears to my mother's and my eyes. Mila glared at the three of us and left without saying goodbye. And then it was my turn to visit his family. Sure enough, Mila was there again. While it wasn't surprising for her to be at her brother's house, her previous attack on my mother made me wary of more hostility. When I greeted his parents and Mila, his parents welcomed me warmly. It's wonderful that such a young lady is marrying William. Truly, she's adorable. At their parents' words, Mila turned away, looking displeased. Luna doesn't fit in with our family, does she? I visited her home recently, and it seems she had to work in a nightclub because of financial struggles. Mila's words made William's mother gasp. A nightclub? Is that true, Luna? Hearing the word nightclub, William's father also turned pale. Like him, it seemed this family had a very negative image of the nightclub industry. Yet, Mila herself had worked in a nightclub. The bullying I experienced, the messy love affairs Mila talked about, including her affairs and double dealings. About her living in a filthy apartment and doing like a stalker. I wondered if his parents knew about it. It looks like you have nothing to say. In that case, just leave. Don't come back to this house again. Mila ignored me, smiled, and said, Can't find the front door of our big house. Shall I show you the way? I couldn't take it anymore because of Mila's words. Fine, I'll call off the engagement. What? Mila looked shocked at my surprised response. I hesitated for a moment, then firmly said, The biggest concern I have about marrying William is you, Mila. What do you mean? You worked in a nightclub too, didn't you? William spoke with a pained expression. Luna told me everything. What are you doing in New York? Besides working in a nightclub, you're also acting like a stalker and living in a filthy apartment. Mila stared at me, shocked by her brother's words. I met her glare without looking away. What's this about a nightclub and being a stalker or living in a filthy apartment? Mila clapped her hands and said, Oh, you mean Luna? When she worked in a nightclub, she always wore outfits that showed off her back and chest. How do you know about my dresses? As I said that, I placed a few photos on the table. They showed several hostesses, with Mila at the front, wearing a revealing outfit as she had described. His parents were so shocked they couldn't say a word. As Mila opened her mouth to make a weak excuse, someone arrived at the front door. Nice to meet you. I'm Levi, Luna's brother. My brother was the waiter from the pub Mila had taken me to. He said he had been listening to our conversation from the counter that day. Normally, of course, I wouldn't do this, but I was worried about what my sister said about her future SIL. My brother played the actual conversation recorded on the recorder, saying that he was scolded by me afterward. William's mother, furious, shouted, What are you doing in New York, doing this again, and wearing such revealing clothes? She cried as she questioned her daughter repeatedly. I looked at him anxiously, but he reassured me by holding my hand firmly. Mila began to cry with her mother, and William's father sat in silence, clenching his hands tightly. Sis, you should give up your place in New York and come back home. Mila realized her family now knew everything. She nodded obediently at her brother's words. Later, Mila and her father spent several days cleaning her apartment. I offered to help, but William said, Let Dad handle it. In a way, it's his way of making amends. William explained that his family's aversion to the nightclub industry stemmed from his father's affair with a nightclub worker, which nearly tore the family apart, leaving deep emotional scars. He told me that his sister, Mila, had also ended up working in a nightclub when she moved to New York with him and was deeply hurt by a customer who deceived her. I was surprised to learn that Mila's unusual behavior wasn't a first-time occurrence. She is a lonely person, and a place like New York is not suitable for her. This time, because I met Luna, I was able to notice her condition. Thank you. I decided to ask him something that had been on my mind. She told me that when she took me to the pub where my brother works, she told me that when she goes to your apartment at night, she sleeps with you. Is that true? He burst into laughter and said, "No way, that's just her lonely imagination. What a joke." A while later, I found out that Mila had left New York with their father after cleaning her apartment. With this, I was able to be free from the one concern I had about getting married my SIL, Mila. We decided to have our wedding near his parents' home. I am looking forward to seeing my family's happy faces on the day.
Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like. If you're interested in other stories, please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.